We are recording. Thank you so much for joining us for another HRAI webinar, this time in sponsorship with ORAC. It is preparing for A2Ls and R32, and we have Ben Middleton, National Sales Training Manager for Daikin, Goodman, and Amana brands. He's joining us to take us through what that transition looks like, what you should know, and we will be taking questions as well if you'd like to pick his brain. But first of all, I'd like to just say hi. Hi, Ben.
Hey, thank you so much for having us here today.
Our pleasure. You've got a fantastic presentation lined up, and I'm going to get out of the way soon. But I got to do my regular housekeeping stuff, which is, like I said at the top, we are taking questions. So if you'd like to ask Ben something throughout the presentation, I will be monitoring chat, which is the button at the bottom of your screen. I think someone's already there. No sound. We will get to that in a second. And you can also put one in the Q&A button as well. If you're having problems with audio, I can help you in chat as well. But until that point, I will turn it over to you, Ben, and I will be waiting there.
All right, sounds great. I'm super excited to be here. This is a topic that has been top of mind for a lot of people as we move into this transition that we're going into. And the first thing I want to recognize is absolutely no human being likes change. Everybody would like things to stay the same. And that's why I love to start this presentation off just kind of going through a quick history of refrigerants and how we got to where we're at today. And so if you go way back to about the mid 1800s, the very first refrigeration system was built and put together. And when that system was built, they had looked at three different refrigerants that they used: alcohol, ammonia, and ether. All three of them are very effective as far as moving BTUs around and getting that heat transfer that we rely on when we're looking at air conditioners and heat pumps. But they had some drawbacks. And they, unfortunately, when they moved into comfort cooling for residential spaces, there were fatalities and instances of property damage when you had leaks with those refrigerants. And so that's where we got our very first kind of regulation around refrigerants. And they came up with two different types of classifications. So they have one for toxicity, which would be the A or the B, and then one for flammability, which they started off with a 1 as non-flammable, a 2L is slightly flammable, a 2 is flammable, and a 3 is highly flammable. And so that's where we kind of got to this whole entire idea of A2Ls that we're going to be talking about today as we kind of go through this presentation and work on it. But the reason that we're making a switch right now is when we take a look at R410A, we know that there's some challenges. Number one, actually R410A has a higher global warming potential than we had with R22. So even though we solved some problems of the Montreal Protocol that everybody remembers when they go ahead and take their exam for the refrigeration license, we solved the issue of the ozone depletion value. What we did not solve when we went to 410A was the challenge of global warming potential. The other thing that we really need to solve for is how do we get more high efficiency out of the refrigerants that we're using? It seems with 410A, we continue to see units getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's just something that is making it a challenge for getting systems installed, for moving equipment around and doing everything else. And then, of course, when you look at refrigerants, we want to make sure with some of the labor shortages that are out there that it's very easy to handle so that we can train and make sure that it's going to be safe and easy for people to be able to utilize. And so the industry kind of looked at all of the options that were available that were going to give us low GWP, high efficiency, and easy to handle. And there were two low GWP refrigerants that kind of rose to the top out of all of the other choices that were out there. There was R32 and there was R454B. Yeah.
Sincere apologies for interrupting there. I think it's popping up on my screen. There's the share bar there.
Well,
just seeing if we can move that because there's some good information I think it's covering up.
We can move it up to the top. Is that better? I don't know why it's
awesome.
not going away.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much. Cheers.
All right. Thank you. All right. So getting back into it real quick. Now that's blocking that. So I don't know where to put this. There we go. All right. So when we boiled it all down, we came down to R32 and R454B as really the two choices, and both have their own pros and cons that we take a look at it. And my goal for today is kind of to walk through those pros and cons and to try to lay out the facts for you. And really, when we look at Daikin, Daikin has decided early on that we believe R32 is the best way to go. And I'll share kind of some of our thinking behind that, but I'll leave it up to you at the end of this to decide, really where you think is the best option as you're going out and serving your customers and you're trying to make sure that you do the best to take care of everybody that you're working for. So that's kind of where we're going with this whole entire presentation as we move forward. So why R32? It's the first resource that I'll kind of give you. And when we get to the end of the presentation, you don't have to write anything down. I'll give you a couple of QR codes so that you can go and access all of this information. But we created a website back in 2019 called r32reasons.com. And we came up with really, when we look at it, that R32 is proven. There's over 230 million units. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. It's very easy. So it's very easy to top off. We'll talk about that a little bit in the field and why that's going to be important for your technicians. It's very efficient. We'll talk about the efficiency and the benefits that you have in your equipment. And then the fact that it's available, it's a commodity. And so that, with a commodity, you're going to be able to take all of those pressures that you have out there and enjoy some really good cost savings potentially because of the fact it is a commodity and it's not a proprietary blend that's out there. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get in and start talking about this. So the very first thing, let's look at Canadian regulations. So Canada ratified the Kigali Amendment, and that was actually happened after the Paris Accords. So you had the Paris Accords that happened, much like the Montreal Protocol. And in that, basically, to sum up what all of the countries that signed on to the Paris Accords, they all agreed that we don't want to raise the temperature of the planet more than 2 degrees Celsius. And so all of these countries that signed into it said, we commit to not raising the temperature of the planet by more than 2 degrees Celsius. And then they ratified that in Rwanda, in the capital city of Kigali, where they got together. And that's where we started to look at how are we going to step down all of the impacts that we have on global warming. And so when we take a look at our sector, we take a look at these step down charts that they have. And so these step down charts, they took a look at the peak of production of all of the virgin refrigerants and their global warming impacts that they have. And they said, okay, all of the producers of refrigerants, we're going to take that peak production and we're going to drop it down to 90%. And so when they dropped that down to the 90% level, what that ended up doing, we noticed a big price increase in 410A because there was just less of it available. So very simple supply and demand, and that had an impact on price. Then when we come to 2025, they dropped it down from 90% to 60%. Now, an interesting thing, because we're in this change of going from 410A to R32, many of the manufacturers had bought up what they needed for 410A in the production that they had. Also, there was quite a few contractors that had bought up 410A that they had. So we really haven't seen a big price increase, but in fact, all of the producers of 410A have drastically dropped the amount of 410A that they can produce because they have a limit on the global warming impact that their company can have. And each company is allotted so much of that amount of gas and the global warming impact that they will have on the environment. And so as that drops down to 60%, we're going to probably start to see some impacts on pricing. If you produce a low GWP refrigerant, you can produce more of that because it has a lower global warming potential. And then there's also, completely separate of this chart, there have been some rules that have been acted as far as limits to the global warming potential of the refrigerant. So in Canada, chillers need to be less than 750 by January of 2025. And I'm still waiting to get all of the information as far as what it's going to be in Canada for air conditioners, but it looks like it's going to be 750 GWP. Again, just following what they did in the United States. And so we're kind of looking at what's happening there. And then there's also some concerns and some questions about what can be imported into Canada from the US. And so some of that stuff is developing on a daily basis. And it would be a great opportunity for us to come back and talk about that sometime in the future as we get more and more information and as more and more legislation is being passed. But today, I do know that there are some provinces that are starting to amend their building codes and are allowing the installation of low GWP refrigerants, which also happen to be A2Ls. So remember, that's still non-toxic, and it's a slightly flammable refrigerant. It's not an A3. One of the things I hear that one of the misconceptions that I hear sometimes when I'm out talking to contractors is, oh no, we're going to propane. We're not going to an A3, and there is no propane in the basis of an R32 refrigerant. So we're not switching over to propane. However, some other countries have done that in other parts of the world and looking at other different types of ways that they can utilize refrigerants. But we'll talk about that in the efficiencies when we get to that too. So what's happening in North America? North American HVAC manufacturers are planning to use either R454B or R32 refrigerants. As I said before, good news is R32 is already a staple in many other countries. And like I said, there's over 230 million systems that have been installed worldwide, and that's in over 130 different countries. Kind of the interesting fact I like to share in terms of safety is, to my knowledge, there's not a single instance of property damage or injuries due to R32 being installed in a home and due to the fact that it's an A2L. So we do know that it is a safe refrigerant. And there's over 50 different equipment manufacturers worldwide that are providing R32 products. Most VRV and VRF and ductless products manufactured outside of North America are predominantly using R32. And so this just kind of gives you a little bit of background when we're looking at the different refrigerants and what's available. So this is what's happening globally. You take a look at all of the other rest of the world, the only area is North America that is considering R32 and R454B. And so when you just look at the simple economics of worldwide economics of scale, we know that there's a lot more R32 that is available. And R454B, one of its components being 1234YF, is a proprietary component. And so when you have a proprietary chemical, that can kind of change, is in terms of availability, because you have limited production, and you also have challenges that will come into play as far as pricing and cost when you have that limited availability. And so that was one of the concerns that we looked at. The good news is R32 has been used for a long, long time. So it started out in Japan in 2012. In fact, Daikin was the first manufacturer to utilize R32. Daikin did not create R32, but we were the first to utilize R32 for air conditioning. And we actually developed technology that optimized some of the characteristics of R32. What we did when we started to look at, where are we going to go with a low GWP refrigerant, is we actually released all of the patents that helped to take advantage of optimizing that and made that available for the whole entire world. And so we released our patents out and said, we really do believe this is the right way to go. And made sure that that technology was available to everybody else to be able to enjoy all of the benefits that R32 has for us. And so we've created kind of these different videos that we've put together. One of the things I've heard as I've been out talking to contractors all over North America is no other manufacturers are using R32. And so you can go and you can take a look at these various different videos we have. So those videos are available also in some of the resources I'll give you at the end. But so here's one of the other big benefits that we really like. So R32 is a single component, just like R22. Many of you that are on the call probably have worked with R22. And so you can charge it in liquid or gas phase. It makes it very simple for you to be able to top a system off after you do a repair. It's very easy for us to recycle, which as we look at these step downs and the capacity for manufacturing, even low GWP refrigerants, it's going to become important that we're recycling more and more of the refrigerants. And so we need an easy process to be able to reclaim and recycle the refrigerant. Blends, because they do leak at unequal rates, make it more difficult for that recycling and reclaiming. And also, you have to make sure that you only charge the system in liquid phase. You don't want to do it in gas because you might compromise the blend that you have. And if a system does get a leak, and it's a major leak, you would have to recover all of that refrigerant and then go ahead and charge from virgin. Versus with refrigerant like R32, you'd be able to utilize the refrigerant that's still left in the system. And so it does make it a lot simpler, a lot easy to work with a single component refrigerant that, again, goes back to helping with the training of the people that you're working with and making sure that everybody is comfortable using the refrigerant as we move forward. Unlike blends, R32 is a single component. Also, this is going to make it easy to service because, again, we're not going to worry about it changing, what it is because it's leaking at different rates. And so that's the first kind of thing that we look at. When we look at the breakdown, it's also interesting to note 70% of R454B is R32. And so when you look at the breakdown of this, R32, 1, 2, 3, 4 YF, 31% of it is that proprietary blend that is owned by Chemours and Honeywell. And to my knowledge, we're just starting to see that product come out and make its way into the marketplace. But that will be this year will be the first time that you'll start to see 454B systems out in the marketplace. And so it'll take a while to see how those systems are going to perform and what's going to happen as they get out into the real world and out of the laboratory testing situations that they've been doing for a while. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but this is really, really important for us to look at. And so there's two things that we're looking at here. Number one, this is the efficiency of how a refrigerant is able to transfer its heat energy. And this right here is the capacity, how many BTUs that refrigerant can hold. And this was really, really important to us when we were taking a look. So if R410A is right here at the center, you can see where all of the other refrigerants are. In terms of efficiency, anything that would be below here would be lower in efficiency in that heat transfer ability. And anything that is going to be on this side of the line is going to be lower in capacity. Why is that important? Well, the less refrigerant I have in a system, the smaller a system can be. And so anything that's going to be to the right of this line means that I can have less refrigerant in the system. Anything to the left of the line means I need more refrigerant in the system. And anything that is below this line is going to need more surface area for that heat transfer to happen. Anything above this line is going to need less surface area for that heat transfer to happen. So with all of that being said, when we take a look at where 410A is, we were looking for something that was going to end up in this quadrant, something that could use less refrigerant and would be able to use less surface area for the heat transfer that we need to be able to get the efficiencies that we're looking for. The only refrigerant that fell into this quadrant was R32. And so that does a couple of things for us. It will allow us to be able to have a smaller footprint on some of our systems, and still maintain the same efficiencies and the same capacities. but it also will allow us to have less transfer or less surface area for transfer, which is going to mean that we're going to get more efficiencies if you keep the same amount of surface area on there, or again, reducing the size of the equipment to get what we need. We know that we're not in the last efficiency, demand that we have. There's a lot of conversations about electrification and heat pumps and what we can do with cold weather heat pumps, which we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But in looking at all of these, we can see 454B is a little bit more efficient in the heat transfer, but you're going to need more of the refrigerant in the system. And so what's interesting is, in fact, you need about 70% less R32. So both systems will have about the same amount of R32 in them. It's just you're adding in that 1, 2, 3, 4 YF. So I think this is really important to understand when you're looking at all of the different choices. By the way, here would be your R290, which is your propane. Again, not falling into this quadrant, which is going to give you all of the desired things that we were looking for. So we did an experiment, and I will never recommend that you take a 410A system and you put a different refrigerant in it. Same thing if you have a 454B system, that needs to remain 454B. If you have an R32 system, that needs to remain R32. You don't change refrigerants. But in a laboratory test environment, we were able to take a 410A system. We took all of the 410A refrigerant out, and then we added R32, and we did our testing. And then we took the R32 out, we added 454B, we did our testing, and here was the results of the testing. If 410A was 100% efficient, what we ended up finding out is we gained 10% in efficiency by adding R32, and we actually lost 5% in efficiency with 454B. And so you can see, again, in our laboratory testing environment, we saw that R32 really was a good place for us to be and for us to go. So we don't believe, though, that this idea of GWP is going to be the final solution that they're going to land on. And so one of the things that we at Daikin really do believe is there's this idea of life cycle climate performance. And what that takes into account is the direct effect from the refrigerant. So if there is a leak in the system, what sort of impact on the environment is that going to have? But there's also this indirect effect from the generation of the product and from the energy that system uses over the course of its lifetime. And that gives you this number, this life cycle climate performance, that we really do believe every system should be measured by if the end goal is truly to reduce greenhouse gases and to be able to reduce the amount of impact that we have on the environment while maintaining a good, comfortable situation for all of the people. So when we take, again, a look at the different refrigerants, you will see, because some people will go back and mention the fact, well, R454B has a lower GWP than R32. So wouldn't that be the more environmental choice for us to use? Well, we got to take a look at everything again. So again, if you look at the dark blue, that is our energy consumption. And so over the course of a system's lifetime, the R410A system is going to use a lot more energy. And this is, again, based off of a like for like unit. An R32 system will use less energy than 410A or 454B. So it already puts us down lower. The gray is the impact from refrigeration leaks. And so we can see 410A is very high. R32 is slightly bigger than 454B because R32 does have a higher GWP. Then we take a look at the refrigerant loss at the end of life, and then we look at the equipment manufacturing. what you actually end up seeing is if we use life cycle climate performance as our measure, R32 actually comes in lower than 454B when we take into account the whole entire life cycle of the system that's being installed in the consumer's home. And so this was another big consideration for us to look at. How can we, by using less refrigerant, so we use 70% of the charge that you would need with 454B, and being able to have a more efficient heat transfer, how is that going to equate into less materials? And again, making a system that's going to have less of an impact on the environment that we're in. The other big thing is because R32 is pure single component, this is going to have a big impact on cost. R32 is less expensive to manufacture than blends, just by the nature of it being a single component. It's less expensive to install and maintain. And then also R32 is a commodity. So every refrigerant manufacturer can make R32, and it doesn't have a proprietary component that could be held up depending if one of those entities that is able to produce the product were to have some challenges with supply chain. At this point in time, I'm going to open it up. I see we've got a couple of questions in here, and I think it's a great time for us to kind of jump into the questions and start getting into these.
Right on. Some of those are just comments that have been taking place throughout the show. So I think the questions have been answered now, but if you would like to, if you're listening to this, please feel free to drop into the chat and put your question there, or there's a Q&A button as well. But
All right,
I will be watching those for sure.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
So we'll get into another real quick video here, just, as far as who owns the patent of R32. Hold on 1 second. All right. I don't think we're sharing at the right place.
Well, while we're doing that, do you have time to take a question?
I do have time for a question.
Fantastic. Are transportation effects being considered? Being a single component, is it being produced in multiple locations worldwide? If I recall, a vast majority of R125 was produced in one factory.
Can you repeat the question real quick?
Sure thing. And it's in the webinar chat. Are transportation effects being considered? Being a single component, is it being produced in multiple locations worldwide? If I recall, the vast majority of R125 was produced in one factory.
Yeah, so R32 being a commodity, that's the great thing about it. And that's why it's so important when we look at this slide. The fact that there are no patents, R32 is being produced all over the globe. And so that does help with transportation. We don't have to transport R32, across the ocean and all over the place. It's got places that are producing R32 right here in North America. Mm-hmm. So it makes it very simple and very easy for you to be able to get R32 versus, again, the 1234YF, which is going to be produced at fewer locations and could potentially have some challenges with production.
Thanks. That was a great question. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
No, here come the questions. All right. Hope you're ready. From Chris, we got two questions. Can you top up systems with R32 without repairing a leak?
So, I mean, best practice in the industry always is you should try to find the leak and repair the leak. And so I would never recommend to anybody just to go top off a system and then let it continue to leak. You know, back when I was doing refrigeration in the field, kind of our best practice, if we had never worked on the system before and it was our first time and it was just slightly off, yes, absolutely, you can top it off because who knows if it was installed correctly. But if we got called back the next year, we're doing a tune-up, and we notice that the system is low again, we've already topped it off once, then we're going to go ahead and perform a leak search, find the leak, fix the leak. The good news is with R32 is you can go ahead and actually suck that all back into the compressor and then go ahead, close your king valves, do the repair. Once you've done the repair, then you go ahead and release the refrigerant that you have, and now you're just topping the system off. With 454B, if it's going to be anything like 410A, I haven't seen the manufacturer's installation manuals yet, but I do know for 410A in the compressor manuals, it always said if you lost more than 50% of the charge, you had to recover all of the refrigerant that was in the system and then go ahead and charge with fresh 410A. That is not the case with R32. It'll be more like R22 in the field. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Chris had another question as well. What are the operating pressures like? And this actually came into chat as well.
So one of the things that I'm going to give you on our resource page is the pressure temperature chart, and you can download that and you can play with it. The nice thing is it's got R22, 410A, 454B, and R32. And so you'll be able to take a look at all of the pressures. What I can tell you is the pressures are very similar to 410A and 454B. There's not much of a difference in between there. So there's nothing different that you have to do than you're already doing with a 410A system today.
Apologies for the noisy keyboard there. Let's roll on. What types of components, devices will end user consumers be required to have to detect a flammable refrigerant in their home or business or building?
So in the systems, and we've made several great episodes on this on our Accelerated HVAC Success podcast, which again, I'll give you guys those resources that you can go ahead and watch those anytime you want. But there's a sensor that's going to be on the coil. And so that's going to have to detect if there is a leak. There are sensors that are made specifically for R32. There are sensors that are made specifically for 454B. And so the idea is when you go ahead and it detects a leak, it will turn the fan on the system. So that will dissipate the refrigerant into the space so that you don't have any catastrophic events that happen in the space. It will also shut down the outdoor unit to equalize pressure, and then obviously a service call to come out there and figure out what's going on with the system. So there's a couple of things that you've got to look at as we continue to move forward into this transition. You're going to have people that just want to change their condenser out. Perhaps maybe they got a brand new furnace 2 or 3 years ago, and now they're going to want to get a new outdoor unit that has an A2L in it. Well, you can do the A2L. It's going to have the sensors in the coil, but you're going to have a board. And we've actually created that kit that is available for contractors to buy. And so the thermostat will be wired into the board. And then the wires from the board will come into the furnace that is a non-A2L compliant furnace. And that will turn on the fan, and the sensor plugs into that board as well from the coil. If there's a leak that is detected, that will turn the fan on to dissipate the refrigerant. If you have an A2L rated furnace, well, then it's going to be simple because you're going to just go ahead and plug from the coil into the board. And so now you have the communication happening that will trigger that and take care of it for you. So if you have an A2L unit outdoors, you'll have to look at that. as the A2L furnaces and the A2L air handlers move into inventory, the other question people have is, well, what if I have a 410A system that was installed 3 years ago, and now I have an A2L furnace? You'll be able to just click a switch on the board that says that it's a non-A2L condenser, and now you have that particular matchup that will work fine with that existing air conditioner that they have as well. So I hope that answers the question. Please follow up if you wanted additional information.
Very comprehensive. Thank you. We got about 6 more questions, but I want to make sure you have time to do your presentation.
I would say keep going. Let's get the questions done while they're hot, and then we'll move on.
Sounds good. Can you reuse R410A line sets for when you install an R32 system? Do you have to flush the line set?
So another great news with R32, I talked about the enhanced capacities that you have with the refrigerant. What that does is it does give us more flexibility in the line sets. And as long as you are following the proper flushing and cleaning procedures as you're changing that system out, there should be no problem in reusing that line set, as long as the line set, again, passes the pressure test that you have, and you do your full evacuation and you make sure that it's holding a vacuum before you release the refrigerant. There should be no issues with using that line set as long as it's properly cleaned.
Thank you. You mentioned some provinces have taken on the R32 for residential. Do you know which one of those provinces are?
So I do know we have product that is up in Quebec right now. And I know that we have some product that is also going into Ontario. I'm not sure of any of the other provinces. And just so everybody knows, in North America, we released R32 ductless product back in 2020. And our very first installs were done in the States back in 2020. And so that's where we first started getting R32 product out into the marketplace. And so Quebec happens to be a very prolific ductless market. And so that's where we're seeing the R32 product that is being brought into the space there.
From Dave comes a question. Can you use a dye and sealer with R32 before topping up?
As long as the dye is compatible with R32, and most of the dyes should be, because 50% of your 410A happens to be R32 as well. So again, you've got very similar oils. Manufacturers always make sure that the oils are optimized for the refrigerant that they're being used with. So I'd say similar oils. I'm not going to say that they're the exact same oils, but very similar oils as you have with 410A, being that 50% of R32 is, or of 410A is R32. So most of the dyes are optimized to be able to work with those oils. But again, check with the manufacturer of the dyes and make sure that they do say it's compatible with R32 before you go ahead and use any of those tools or dyes.
I want to make sure, I think he might have answered a little bit, but Derek also has a similar question. Does R32 use POE oil?
Yes.
There you go. That's a quick one. From Joe comes, is R32 only for high temperature air conditioning applications?
For high temperature air conditioning applications.
That's as stated. I don't know if, Joe, you want to add some clarification to that. Let's come back to that. From another, can you talk about 407C, a replacement for R32? Or R22, my apologies.
So I will tell you this, any refrigerant replacements, there is no replacement for 410A. 407C, any replacement that you use, most of the R22 product that is out there today is probably outside of manufacturer warranty. Maybe barring some of the dry units that were put out there into the marketplace. But whenever you change and go to another alternative refrigerant, those alternative refrigerants haven't been tested by the factory. So you can't ensure efficiencies, and you can't ensure a lot of times that will void warranties as well. So as a manufacturer, it's generally not recommended that you use an alternative refrigerant.
Thank you. A good question from Kevin coming up. What are the forthcoming provisions regarding sell-through period as it pertains to dry charge R410A equipment for service replacements, similar to the transitional period we experienced from R22 to R410A?
So I can speak again, we're still waiting to get some legislation on just being able to ship product up to Canada, and what that is going to look like in all of the different provinces, and making sure that the building codes are understood and we know how that's going to go for the installation. I can speak a little bit to what the EPA, a ruling that just came through the EPA. So there's a couple of things. One, in the United States, they have said if the outdoor unit is deemed a service part, and so it's not an entire system. So you're not changing an outdoor unit with a coil and doing a whole entire system, but you're just changing the outdoor unit and it's a service part, then a dry unit is allowed. And again, I'm sorry, I just can't speak to how Canada is interpreting that and putting it together, but I can tell you what the US has said. In terms of sell-through for product, the US has said that they're going to give 1 year, so all the way to the end of 2025, any inventory that somebody has in stock, they will be able to sell through their 410A inventory that they have. However, manufacturers have to stop on January 1st of 2025 manufacturing 410A product. That does not mean that a manufacturer cannot make dry units. But again, those dry units are, the intended purpose is only for them to be installed as a service part and not for them to be installed as a entire system, if that makes sense.
So Joe provided clarification for his question. Is R32 only for air conditioning versus refrigeration? So medium/low temperatures.
Oh, okay. Now I understand the question. Mm-hmm. Really, I'm not a refrigeration specialist, so I can't speak to if R32 is used in refrigeration systems or not. It's a great question, and I can find out for you, and I can get it back, and you guys can get that answer out to everybody else.
Sure thing. All right. We still have a few more. Do you want to?
Yeah, let's do that. And then I'll go ahead and I'll wrap up and show some resources that we have available for everybody.
Sure. All right, let's do some rapid fire stuff. Is R32 refrigerant bottles available in Ontario?
I believe it is the smaller bottles of the R32 refrigerant that is available today. And that was one of the questions that we actually were working through right now. And I'm not 100% sure if it was Ontario or if it's Quebec that we are able to have the bottles available. So I'd have to clarify if it was Quebec or Ontario.
Right. Is there a specific compressor technology recommended for R32? For example, scroll, centrifugal. I probably mispronounced that. And if so, why?
So all of the compressor types work well with R32. Again, that just depends how you're compressing the refrigerant, and then your TXV or your EEV is going to help with that pressure change to be able to get the temperature split that you're looking to get, to be able to get the heat transfer that you're trying to get out of the system. So there's not one preferred method for how you compress the refrigerant and then how you decompress the refrigerant to be able to get that energy transfer that you're getting out of the system. It's just the fact that you have to do it. Some of the compressors are more efficient with how they compress a refrigerant, so such as a scroll compressor versus a reciprocating compressor. And then like the Daikin swing compressor, if you have less moving parts, you have less friction, which will in turn make a system more efficient and also help that system to last longer because you have less components that could potentially fail within that mechanical device.
Thanks. By the way of clarification, Jeff put HRAI has a B152 adoption tracker to answer the question about which provinces are adopting and which are pending. So if you're listening and you'd like to get that, just reach out to HRAI.
Perfect.
Yeah. So let's go to the, I'm just moving back and forth between chat and the Q&A. Ben, says Elon, do we have canisters of R32 in both Ontario and Quebec as well as Atlantic?
So again, to my knowledge right now, it's either Ontario or Quebec. And I need to get clarification on. I did write that down that I'll tell you. Yep.
My apologies. So it
That's
looks
right.
like Ben's shouting at me here. He says, no, I said we do have canisters of R32 in both. Okay. That was my bad. Sorry, Ben. Or no, sorry. There's a lot of questions. Just give me some patience. Chris says, can you convert existing systems to R32, which I believe we've covered, but let's just.
No, if it's a 410A system, you got to keep it 410A. If it's R32, it needs to stay R32. If it's 454B, it needs to stay 454B. You can't just switch those back and forth.
Thank you. My question is about the A2L-ness of the R32. Is it technically fair to say that the only risk involved is only when the refrigerant is in application and not necessarily when it is being packaged or stored? Do we really need the same level of risk avoidance or risk management?
Well, so, I mean, with any compressed gas, you have to treat it as a compressed gas. I mean, there's a risk that's associated with all compressed gas. And I do think there's even a ruling that they're looking at in Canada right now that would limit the amount of compressed gas cylinders that you would have on a truck. And so that would even be your nitrogen, which we know is an inert gas, but that would be another compressed cylinder that you have. So any compressed cylinder you have to make sure that you maintain your safety standards. As far as storage of the refrigerant, if there was a potential for a leak and there is an ignition source, obviously that does need to be, something that you're aware of and something that you have a plan for. And so that's where each different city, municipality, province that you guys have is going to come up with the rules for storage, for transportation, and for then your safe handling, again, while you're actually working with the refrigerant at the unit. But you're going to have to check with your local codes and regulations and make sure you adhere to those codes and regulations in regards to an A2L refrigerant that you have.
Okay. There's a couple lingering ones, but they're more comments. I'm going to see if I can get clarification. If you want to kind of go forward with the presentation, I'll manage things from this end.
All right. That sounds great. That sounds wonderful. So let's get to some of the resources that we have available for you. So if you take a look at this QR code right here and you hold your phone up to it, you're going to be able to go right to this form, and you'll be able to download this form that you have, and it will give you kind of some of the stuff, that talking points that we've talked about here as we've been going through this. And so a couple of things that I do want to highlight again here. Again, the composition. When you look at 410A, 50% R32. When you look at 454B, 68.9% R32. We do have that they're A2Ls. System capacity. So this is where we talked about the capacity of the system. Refrigerant charge size up to 40% smaller. And so, I always like to keep that a little bit conservative. And I say you're going to use about 70% of the same charge that you would with a 454B system. So again, It's not proprietary. It's something that's available. It's a commodity. And so this is a great sheet, a great resource for you to be able to have and for you to be able to use, to be able to access. And then the other big place that I want to make sure everybody goes to is the HVAC Learning Campus that we have available. This should take you right into our site, and we have a resource page that is available. And I'll go ahead and take us to that resource page real quickly and let you guys be able to see what we have available there. And so I'm just going to change my screen share here real quick.
Just a quick note, Ben.
Yeah.
I think some people are having problems with the QR code. That doesn't seem to be going to the desired landing.
Even the one that we have right now?
I think the previous one is when they were saying.
All right, well, let me show you a different way to get there then, I guess. And I'll get you guys there in just a second. So let me do this real quick. And I'm going to run over here to...
Second code seems to be doing A-okay.
All right. So that's going to bring you to the HVAC Learning Campus. You're going to come in as a dealer. When you come in here, tools, and then you're going to go to resources. Under resources, we have R32. This is where I was talking about. So we've got training resources for you. We've got the R32
Uh-oh. Either Ben's doing a really good mime impression, or I think he's frozen. So we'll just give him a few seconds to return here. Hello, Ben. No, hopefully the QR code didn't. Okay, let's give it a few more minutes here. If you have any further questions, oh, okay, which means he's gonna be coming back anytime now. So it's just me. We got a couple more questions in the hopper here. Just a couple comments. Definitely appreciate the comments. Thank you so much. We're always taking feedback. So I will answer that one from the anonymous. And we will just wait for Ben to return. In the meantime, you can enjoy my wonderful office. If you'd like to be Ben, well, be Ben on the screen and do your own webinar. We are putting together the schedule for summer and fall. You can reach out to myself or anyone through HRAI's webpage, and we can get that settled for you. We can do an hour webinar on a thought leadership topic of your choice. And as you can see, we get a good crowd out to do that. And if you like this video and if you want to go over some of the information that Ben shared, it will be on the HRAI YouTube page after the fact. So it's 12:56 now.